Lucas opened the live feed expecting silence. Routine. Another empty confirmation that nothing ever changed in that house while he built empires from glass towers. Instead, two wheelchairs sat abandoned in the middle of the living room. Empty. His breath caught. For a split second, his mind rejected what his eyes were seeing. Equipment didn't move on its own. Wheelchairs didn't empty themselves. His daughters didn't stand. Then the camera panned. Ella and Grace, 5 years old, paralyzed since infancy, standing, not leaning, not braced, not held up by machines. Standing on trembling legs every neurologist in 3 states had sworn would never bear weight, taking slow, deliberate steps toward a woman with her arms outstretched. The Maid. The phone slipped from Lucas's hand, hit the floor. His knees buckled as the impossible unfolded in real time on a screen he'd installed to catch failure, not miracles. The billionaire who had signed never into medical forms watched it dissolve in his own living room. 14 caregivers had quit in 18 months. 14 professionals, specialists, therapists, each one defeated by screaming sessions, thrown toys, rigid limbs, and 2 little girls who refused every prescribed exercise. Lucas had called it reality. Then he watched his daughters walk. 3 years ago, Lucas Harrington lost the only person who ever made him believe in things money couldn't buy. His wife, Meline, died at 27. Brain cancer. 18 months from diagnosis to funeral. She held on long enough to see the twins turn 2. Long enough to whisper prayers over their tiny bodies in the NICU. Long enough to write dates and exercises and scriptures in a journal no one knew existed. Then she was gone. No warning that the headaches meant death. No time to prepare for the moment Lucas would become both father and mother to 2 daughters who couldn't walk, couldn't stand, could barely hold their heads up without support. The doctors didn't wait long to deliver the second blow. Mr. Harrington, given the extent of the neurological damage, we need to be realistic. Walking is extremely unlikely. The muscle development simply isn't there. We're looking at lifelong mobility assistance. Lucas heard the words. He nodded. He signed the forms, but he didn't accept them. Not then. He threw money at the problem like artillery fire, hired neurologists from Johns Hopkins, flew in specialists from Germany, purchased equipment so advanced it required its own technician, custom wheelchairs, adaptive furniture, a home therapy room that cost more than most people's houses. Nothing changed. Ella and Grace sat in their wheelchairs, small bodies, distant eyes. They cried through every session. They resisted every exercise. And Lucas, alone in his Connecticut estate, watching surveillance feeds at 2 a.m., started to bury the hope Meline had planted. His daughters would never walk, never run, never chase each other through the gardens Meline had dreamed about. He buried that future right next to his wife. Then came the caregivers, 14 in 18 months. The first quit after 3 weeks, said the twins were too difficult. The second lasted 5 days before she stopped showing up. The third seemed perfect, gentle, patient, experienced, until Lucas discovered she'd been sedating the girls to make them easier to manage. After that, something inside Lucas turned to stone. One caregiver was found stealing jewelry from Meline's room. Another posted photos of the twins online without permission. Each one arrived with credentials and compassion and left with Lucas's trust shattered on the floor. He stopped seeing people as people. He saw liability, risk, inevitable disappointment. So he installed cameras everywhere, every room, every angle, every moment documented and archived. He watched the footage during board meetings, during flights, during dinners he ate alone, rewinding, zooming, looking for the mistake, the betrayal, the moment everything would fall apart again. Control became his religion. Surveillance, his prayer. When Jasmine Cole walked through his front door, 24 years old, calm eyes, quiet presence, Lucas didn't see a person. He saw failure number 15 waiting to happen. No improvising, he told her. Not looking up from the contract. No deviating from the medical protocols. The neurologists have been very clear about their limitations. I need you to follow the therapy schedule exactly. No creativity. No hope speeches. Just the routine. Jasmine nodded slowly. I understand, Mr. Harrington. But she didn't understand. Or maybe she understood something Lucas had forgotten. Because Jasmine didn't follow his rules. She sang to those girls when the house was empty. She moved their legs in patterns no therapist had prescribed. She prayed over them like Madeline used to, like she believed their bodies could remember what their mother had taught them, like she believed diagnosis wasn't destiny. And Lucas watched it all through his cameras. At first, he watched to catch her breaking protocol, document the violation, protect himself from another lawsuit, another scandal, another failure. Then he watched because he couldn't look away, because something was happening in that house, something small at first. Ella stopped screaming during leg exercises. Grace's spine straightened when Jasmine sang. Their eyes, those distant, empty eyes, started tracking movement, started focusing, started seeing. Lucas told himself it meant nothing. Coincidence, placebo, temporary. He told himself hope was a luxury he couldn't afford. He told himself the doctors knew best. But late at night, alone in his office with the blue glow of monitors washing over his face, Lucas watched a woman fight for his daughters with nothing but patience and faith she had no logical reason to possess. And somewhere deep, in his chest, in a place he thought had died in a hospital room 3 years ago, something cracked. He didn't trust it. He couldn't. Because hope, when you've buried it that deep, doesn't feel like relief. It feels like the cruelest trap God ever set. But before we go further, let me ask you something. Have you ever felt like believing again might break you? Like hope was too dangerous to pick up after you've watched it shatter? Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from, and make sure to subscribe, because this story isn't just about 2 little girls who learned to walk. It's about a father who learned to see again. Sometimes miracles don't announce themselves. They just show up in empty wheelchairs and shaking legs, and the faithfulness of a woman who refused to accept impossible as final. To understand what Jasmine did, we have to go back. Back to the woman who believed before anyone else did. Back to the mother who never stopped fighting, even when her own body was failing. Back to Madeline. But Madeline's story doesn't begin with her death. It begins with what she left behind. Not in a will or a trust fund, in a journal, in whispered exercises, in a routine she performed in secret because she knew Lucas had stopped believing long before the cancer took her voice. Madeline knew she was dying 6 months before Lucas accepted it. While he hired specialists and researched experimental treatments, she sat alone with Ella and Grace in their nursery, moving their tiny legs in gentle circles, singing hymns her grandmother taught her, praying over muscle tissue that doctors said would never respond. She didn't tell Lucas. He would have called it false hope, dangerous, irresponsible. But Madeline didn't see hope as optional. She saw it as obedience. So she worked. Every afternoon when Lucas was at board meetings, every evening after the nurses left, she documented everything in a leather journal she kept hidden beneath the vanity in her bathroom. Dates, scripture references, small victories no scan could measure. Then she died. And the routine died with her. Until Jasmine Cole walked through the front door on a cold Tuesday morning in October, carrying nothing but a small suitcase and a patience she couldn't explain. Jasmine was 24, raised in a small Pentecostal church in North Carolina, where her grandmother led worship, and her mother ran the prayer line. She wasn't wealthy, wasn't educated beyond community college, but she'd learned something in those Sunday services that no medical textbook taught: how to watch, how to wait, how to listen for what wasn't being said. Her first day with the twins was chaos. Ella screamed the moment Jasmine touched her wheelchair. Grace threw her juice cup across the room, shattering it against the marble floor. The physical therapist, who'd stayed to observe, shook her head and muttered something about behavioral issues. Jasmine didn't react. She sat down on the floor, right there on the cold marble, surrounded by broken glass and screaming children. She didn't try to calm them, didn't offer toys or distractions. She just sat, and she watched. She watched how Ella's scream changed pitch when someone moved too fast, how Grace's hands clenched when anyone touched her legs without warning, how both girls looked toward the window whenever the afternoon light hit the garden in a certain way. The therapist left after 20 minutes. Jasmine stayed. She stayed through the screaming, through the tears, through the moment when both girls finally exhausted themselves into silence and just stared at her with something that looked like confusion. "Why are you still here?" That first week, Jasmine didn't follow the protocol Lucas left on the kitchen counter. She didn't push exercises or force routines. She observed. She learned their rhythms. What time of day they were most calm, what sounds made them tense, how they responded to gentle touch versus clinical handling. And every night, after the house fell silent and Lucas retreated to his office to watch surveillance feeds, Jasmine prayed. Not loud, not performative, just quiet conversations with God about two little girls who'd been told they were broken. The breakthrough came 3 weeks later, in the most unexpected place. Lucas had asked Jasmine to clean out Madeline's old bedroom. It had been untouched since her death. Clothes still hanging in the closet, perfume bottles still arranged on the dresser, a room preserved like a museum to grief. Jasmine moved through it carefully, respectfully. She wasn't there to erase Madeline. She was there to honor what remained. That's when she found it. Tucked beneath the vanity, behind boxes of jewelry and scarves, was a leather journal. Worn, well used, the pages soft from repeated handling. Jasmine opened it slowly. The first page was dated 2 years earlier. Madeline's handwriting, elegant and deliberate. Day 1. Ella's left leg showed slight response to resistance. Grace tracked my finger for 3 seconds. Small but present. Thank you, Lord. Page after page. Dates, exercises, scripture references written in the margins. Philippians 4:13. Isaiah 40:31. Psalm 121. Jasmine's hands trembled as she read. This woman had been working, believing, fighting in secret, while the world around her accepted defeat. The final entry was dated 1 week before Madeline died. I don't know if I'll see them walk, but I know this. Faith requires repetition. What I start, someone will finish. God doesn't leave assignments incomplete. Jasmine closed the journal. Her eyes burned with tears she didn't try to hide. This wasn't abandonment. This was an unfinished assignment. And somehow, in ways Jasmine couldn't fully understand, she'd been brought here to complete it. That night, after Lucas left for a business dinner and the house fell into its familiar silence, Jasmine brought the journal downstairs. She read through each exercise, each prayer, each small notation of progress. Then she began. She positioned Ella first. Gentle pressure on the legs, just like Madeline had described. No force, no rush, just presence and prayer. Ella cried at first, not in pain, in fear. Jasmine didn't stop. She sang the same hymn Madeline had written in the margin. Great is thy faithfulness. Soft, steady. Ella's crying slowed. Grace watched from her wheelchair, eyes wide. Jasmine moved to her next. Same gentle pressure, same hymn, same whispered prayer. It took 40 minutes before either girl relaxed enough to let Jasmine work without resistance. But they did. And Jasmine continued. Not every day. Only when the house was empty. When Lucas was traveling or locked in meetings. She didn't know about all the cameras. She assumed privacy when the rooms were silent. Progress was slow. Painful slow. Some days there was no progress at all. Ella's legs would tremble and collapse. Grace would cry and refuse to continue. But Jasmine stayed. She repeated the exercises exactly as Meline had written them. She prayed the same scriptures. She sang the same songs. Weeks passed. Then one Thursday afternoon, while Lucas was in Manhattan closing a deal, it happened. Jasmine had Ella in position, hands supporting her torso, legs positioned for standing. She'd done this 100 times. Always the same result. Trembling, collapsing, tears. But this time, Ella's legs held. Not long, maybe 5 seconds, but they held. Jasmine's breath caught. Her heart hammered against her ribs. "Thank you, Jesus," she whispered. Not loud, not celebratory, just quiet, reverent acknowledgement. Ella looked up at her, those distant eyes suddenly focused, suddenly present. And for the first time since Jasmine had arrived, Ella smiled. Grace saw it happen. From her wheelchair, she watched her sister stand. Watched. Her legs hold weight. Watched the impossible become briefly, tremblingly real. Jasmine lowered Ella back into her chair, hands shaking. Then she prayed out loud, not whispered, not hidden, out loud, with tears streaming down her face and faith swelling in her chest like something alive. "God, I don't know why you brought me here, but I'm not leaving. Whatever you started in Meline, finish it through me. Use these hands. Use this time. Let these girls walk. Not for me. For the mother who believed when no one else would." The prayer echoed in the empty living room. Neither twin made a sound. They just watched. Listened. As if hearing something they'd been waiting for all along. Somewhere upstairs, in Lucas's office, a camera silently recorded everything. The first person to notice the change wasn't Lucas. It was Dr. Rebecca Chen, the physical therapist who'd been working with the twins for 8 months. She arrived on a Monday morning expecting the usual resistance, screaming, stiff limbs, tears that lasted the entire session. Instead, she found Ella sitting upright in her wheelchair, not slumped, not leaning, upright, with her spine straight and her head held steady. Dr. Chen paused in the doorway. "How long has she been able to do that?" Jasmine, who was preparing Grace for the session, looked up calmly. "She's been getting stronger." "Stronger?" Dr. Chen moved closer. Professional curiosity overriding protocol. She examined Ella's posture, checked her neck stability, tested her core engagement. "This isn't gradual improvement. This is significant muscle development. What's changed?" Jasmine didn't answer directly. "We've been working." "Working how? This isn't in the treatment plan." "No," Jasmine agreed quietly. "It's not." Dr. Chen documented everything. The improved posture, Grace's increased leg mobility, the way both girls tracked movement with focused attention instead of vacant stares. She sent her report to Lucas that afternoon with a subject line that read, "Urgent, unexplained progress." Lucas read it during a meeting, read it twice, then deleted it. Coincidence, he told himself. Temporary improvement. Bodies sometimes had random good days before returning to baseline. The doctors had warned him about getting excited over false progress. But that night, alone in his office, Lucas opened the security feed. He told himself he was just checking. Routine surveillance, making sure Jasmine wasn't doing anything dangerous. What he saw made his hands go cold. Jasmine, kneeling on the living room floor. The twins positioned in front of her, not in their wheelchairs, but on a padded mat. She was moving their legs in slow, deliberate patterns, singing something he couldn't hear through the silent feed. And Ella, God, Ella was pushing back. Her legs were resisting the movement, engaging, responding. Lucas watched for 40 minutes. He watched Jasmine help Grace into a supported standing position, watched her legs tremble but hold for 3, 4, 5 seconds before Jasmine lowered her back down. Watched the patience in every movement, the prayer on her lips, the absolute conviction in her posture. His chest tightened. This wasn't protocol. This wasn't authorized therapy. This was disobedience, liability, a lawsuit waiting to happen if one of them got injured. But it was also something else. Something Lucas didn't have a word for. He started checking the feeds constantly, between meetings, during flights, at 2 a.m. when sleep wouldn't come. He watched Jasmine work with his daughters in the empty house, watched their bodies respond in ways specialists said they never would, watched progress happen in real time while he sat miles away behind a screen. The fear grew with every video. Not fear that she'd hurt them, fear that she was giving them something he couldn't. Something that looked dangerously like hope. 3 weeks after Dr. Chen's report, Lucas left a board meeting early, told his assistant to cancel his afternoon, drove home at 80 miles per hour with his jaw clenched and his hands gripping the steering wheel like it was the only solid thing left in his world. He found Jasmine in the living room with the twins, not in their wheelchairs, on the floor, working through exercises he'd never authorized. "Stop!" His voice cut through the room like a blade. Jasmine looked up slowly. No panic, no guilt, just calm acknowledgement. "Mr. Harrington, you're home early." "I said stop." Lucas moved toward them, his body rigid with controlled anger. "What do you think you're doing?" Jasmine helped Grace back into her wheelchair before standing. "I'm helping your daughters." "Helping?" Lucas's voice rose. "You're disobeying direct medical orders. You're performing unauthorized therapy that could cause permanent damage. Do you understand the liability you've created? The risk? I understand you're afraid." The words landed like a slap. Lucas stared at her. "Excuse me?" "You're afraid," Jasmine repeated, her voice steady. "You're afraid that if you believe they can improve and they don't, it will break you. So you've decided it's safer not to believe at all. You don't know what you're talking about. Your wife knew." Silence crashed into the room. Lucas felt his breathing stop. "What did you say?" Jasmine reached into her pocket and pulled out Madeline's journal, worn leather, pages soft from use. She held it out to him. "Madeline was doing this work long before I arrived. She documented everything. Every exercise, every prayer, every small victory. She believed your daughters could walk when no one else did, including you." Lucas stared at the journal like it was something dangerous. "Where did you get that?" "She left it for whoever was willing to finish what she started." Jasmine's voice didn't waver. "She wrote that faith requires repetition, that God doesn't leave assignments incomplete. I'm not disobeying your orders, Mr. Harrington. I'm completing hers. My wife was dying. She wasn't thinking clearly. She was thinking clearly enough to fight for them when you'd already given up." The words hit like bullets. Lucas's face went white. "Get out." "No. I'm firing you." "Then fire me." Jasmine didn't move. "But before you do, look at your daughters. Actually look at them. Not through a camera, not through fear. Look at them and tell me you don't see change." Lucas turned. Against every instinct telling him not to, he looked. Ella was sitting upright, spine straight, eyes focused. Grace's legs were positioned differently, stronger, more controlled. Both girls were watching him with an awareness that hadn't been there months ago. He saw it. God help him, he saw it. "This isn't possible," he whispered. "It's happening anyway." Lucas felt something crack in his chest, something he'd kept locked and frozen since Madeline's funeral. "I can't," His voice broke. I can't hope again. I can't survive losing them too. Jasmine's expression softened. You're not losing them, Mr. Harrington. You're just scared of finding them. 2 days later, Dr. Chen returned with a colleague. Lucas had requested a full assessment, documentation, scientific confirmation or refutation. They ran tests for 90 minutes, muscle response evaluations, range of motion measurements, core stability analysis, balance tests, everything quantifiable. When they finished, Dr. Chen looked at Lucas with something like disbelief in her eyes. I don't know how to explain this, she said quietly, but their muscle engagement has improved by 30%. Grace's core stability is approaching normal range for her age. Ella's leg strength is measurable where it wasn't before. This isn't placebo. This is real development. Her colleague nodded. Whatever's happening, it's working. I'd recommend continuing exactly what you're doing. After they left, Lucas stood alone in his office. The medical report spread across his desk. Scientific confirmation of the impossible. He realized something in that moment. Something that hurt worse than Madeline's death. He'd stopped believing the day she died. Stopped trusting anything he couldn't control. He'd replaced faith with surveillance, hope with protocols, love with liability protection. Money had become his shield against disappointment. And behind that shield, his daughters had been disappearing. Lucas opened his laptop, pulled up the live security feed. His hand hovered over the keyboard. For 3 years, he'd watched his life through screens, observed without participating, controlled without connecting. The feed loaded. Jasmine was in the living room, singing. The twins were on the mat, working through exercises with visible effort and small, determined movements. Lucas watched for 10 seconds. Then he stood up. And for the first time since Meline died, he left the screen behind and walked toward his daughters in person. Lucas was halfway through a presentation when his phone vibrated. Security alert. Living room camera. He ignored it, kept talking, projected confidence while venture capitalists nodded and took notes. This deal would add another $50 million to his portfolio, another record, another headline. The phone vibrated again, then again. Lucas excused himself, stepped into the hallway, pulled up the security feed with hands that had started to shake without permission. The living room filled his screen. 2 empty wheelchairs sat in the center of the room. His heart stopped. Then the camera panned, and Lucas saw what 14 specialists had sworn he'd never see. Ella and Grace were standing, not leaning against furniture, not propped by equipment, standing on their own trembling legs with Jasmine's arms outstretched 3 feet in front of them, encouraging, steady, believing. Ella took a step, small, shaking, her whole body vibrating with effort, but a step. Grace followed, less stable, more hesitant, but moving. Actually moving forward on legs that had been pronounced permanently paralyzed. Lucas couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't do anything but watch his daughters walk toward a woman who'd had the audacity to believe when he'd chosen despair. No rush, no magic, just months of faithful repetition, prayer, and love. Every second earned, every step a resurrection. Lucas didn't remember leaving the building, didn't remember the drive home, didn't remember anything except his daughters' faces on that screen, focused, determined, alive in a way he hadn't seen since Meline died. He burst through the front door. The living room was exactly as the camera had shown it. Empty wheelchairs. Jasmine kneeling now, arms still outstretched. And his daughters, his daughters, standing on shaking legs, holding themselves upright through sheer will and accumulated strength. The phone slipped from Lucas's hand, hit the marble floor. The sound made everyone turn. Ella saw him first. "Daddy?" The word broke him. Lucas dropped to his knees right there in the doorway, 6 feet from his daughters, close enough to see the sweat on their foreheads from the effort, close enough to see the light in their eyes that surveillance cameras had never captured, close enough to realize he'd been watching their lives instead of living in them. "I'm here," his voice cracked. "I'm here, baby. I'm here." Grace's legs started to buckle. Jasmine moved to support her, but Lucas was already moving. He crawled across the floor, the billionaire in a $3,000 suit crawling like a child, and caught Grace before she fell. He pulled both girls into his arms, felt their small bodies against his chest, felt their breath, their heartbeats, their realness in a way no screen had ever conveyed. And Lucas Harrington, who hadn't cried since Madeline's funeral, sobbed. Not quiet tears, not dignified grief, desperate, gasping sobs that came from somewhere he'd locked away 3 years ago. "I'm sorry." The words tumbled out between breaths. "I'm so sorry. I wasn't here. I wasn't present. I was so afraid of losing you that I never let myself have you." Ella's small hand touched his face. "You're here now." 4 words. Simple. Devastating. Lucas looked up at Jasmine. She was still kneeling, giving them space, tears streaming down her own face. "You brought them back," he whispered. Jasmine shook her head. "No, Mr. Harrington. Your wife brought them this far. I just finished the route she mapped." Lucas thought about Madeline then. Really thought about her for the first time since her death. Not the grief, not the loss, but the woman herself. The faith she carried, the prayers she whispered, the hope she planted in secret because she knew he'd stopped believing. She'd known. She'd known he would need proof before he could trust miracles again. So she'd left instructions for the miracle in a journal hidden beneath her vanity. Lucas closed his eyes, and for the first time since standing in that hospital room, watching his wife take her last breath, he prayed out loud. "God," his voice broke, started again. "God, I don't know if I have the right to ask you for anything. I've been angry at you for 3 years, blamed you for taking her, for breaking my daughters, for leaving me alone." Ella and Grace were silent in his arms, listening. "But I see now that you never left. You sent Madeline to prepare the way. You sent Jasmine to finish it. You were working when I thought you were silent. You were moving when I thought you'd abandoned us." He opened his eyes, looked at his daughters, truly looked at them, not through a screen but face to face. "Thank you for not giving up on us when I gave up on you. Thank you for bringing our girls back. And Madeline," his voice cracked again, "baby, if you can hear me, thank you for believing when I couldn't. Thank you for fighting when I quit. Thank you for loving them better than I did." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full, sacred. Jasmine spoke quietly. "She's hearing you, Mr. Harrington, and she's proud." Lucas believed her. The next morning, Dr. Chen arrived with updated therapy plans. Lucas listened, nodded, then made his own modifications. "Jasmine stays," he said firmly. "Not as a caregiver, as family. Whatever she needs, salary, benefits, housing, it's hers. She's not staff anymore." Dr. Chen smiled. "I think that's exactly right." Over the following weeks, Lucas made other changes. He had the cameras removed, all of them, every room, every angle, every lens that had let him observe life instead of living it. He started coming home at 5 instead of 9. Started having dinner with his daughters instead of watching them through feeds. Started reading them stories, helping with exercises, being present for the small moments that surveillance had made him miss. The first time Ella walked across the entire living room without support, Lucas was right there. Not watching from an office, not viewing delayed footage. Right there, arms outstretched, ready to catch her if she fell. She didn't fall. Neither did Grace 3 days later. 1 month after Lucas watched that security feed from the hallway of a venture capital firm, he stood in his office for the last time as the man he used to be. The monitors were dark, the equipment packed away. The desk that had become his hiding place now felt like a monument to cowardice. Lucas opened Madeline's journal. Read her final entry again. Faith requires repetition. What I start, someone will finish. God doesn't leave assignments incomplete. He understood now what she meant. Faith wasn't a single prayer. It was daily obedience, repeated action, showing up even when the evidence said, stay away. Money had built this house, had funded specialists and equipment and cameras that created the illusion of control, but money hadn't healed his daughters. Love did that. Patient, faithful, persistent love that believed in resurrection when death seemed final. Lucas picked up a pen, turned to a blank page in Madeline's journal, and wrote, "Today Ella and Grace walked 20 steps without help. Tomorrow they'll try for 30. I don't know how far they'll go, but I know I'll be there to see it. Not through a screen, not from a distance, present, believing, finally awake." He closed the journal, walked downstairs to where his daughters were laughing with Jasmine in the living room, and Lucas Harrington, who'd spent 3 years hiding behind glass and steel and surveillance feeds, walked into the room and sat down on the floor with his family. Outside, the sun set over gardens Madeline had dreamed about. Inside, her daughters played on legs she'd believed in before anyone else. And somewhere beyond sight and screens and the limits of what money could buy, a mother's prayer completed itself in the laughter of children who'd learned to walk because someone had refused to stop believing. The miracle wasn't that they could stand. The miracle was that their father finally could too.